Welcome to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, a weekly visit to the crossroads of leadership, communication, and engagement, where we provide captivating conversation while helping you create your compelling company culture. Get meaningful insights on these topics from fascinating interviews with top business leaders, trendsetters in leadership research, and perspective commentary from your host, myself, Dr. Dave Miles. So with us today, we are thrilled to have Bill Wiley. And Bill is a lot of different backgrounds that he's coming from not just a business leadership perspective, but also a political perspective. But I want to turn it over to you, Bill. Thank you for joining us today on the show. And if you don't mind taking a few minutes and introduce yourself to our listeners and give us a little bit of your background kind of on both ends.
Thank you, Dr. Dave, for having me. My name is Bill Wiley. I'm your delegate here in the 29th District, which pretty much encompasses Frederick County, Winchester, and the northern part of Warren County. I'm from Roanoke, Virginia, down southwest Virginia. Most people recognize that area, but born and raised down in the city, and then I lived out in the county, worked on a farm, and went to school, and then went away to school, went to high school up in Northern Virginia, boarding school, and then undergrad and graduate at George Mason University. Went on various different jobs till I kind of landed out here in Winchester with my wife, and it was kind of on a whim, was a compromise. She's from Maryland, and she's a city girl. I'm not the city kind of person, so we moved out here as kind of a way to, got the small town city atmosphere, and at the same time I can kind of get out in the county and enjoy my rural roots. We've been here for about 20 years. We have three beautiful boys, live right here in downtown Winchester on the parade route, work for Shockey in business development, and been serving in various different boards and commissions and committees throughout the city, and finally decided to step up being city council member. And then the next thing I know, I'm jumping up being a delegate. And my way of doing it is all about giving back. So I really enjoy what I'm doing right now, and I'm really excited for that upcoming session and all the rest of the hats that I wear, but just really excited to be here. And thank you for letting me be here today, Dave.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for being here. And for, by the way, I forgot to throw a shout out to some of our listeners in the UK. We've been looking at the stats and have had quite a bump up there here recently. But for those folks, specifically the ones that aren't in the local Northern Shenandoah Valley area, tell them what Shockey is and what you do there.
Yeah, good question. So Howard Shockey and Sons is a regional general contractor. We build vertical commercial facilities, sectors, about 5 different sectors: industrial, assisted living, medical, parking garages, K-12, municipal, and the like throughout the state of Virginia, West Virginia, and Maryland. And my regional coverage is pretty much the 81 corridor, the Shenandoah Valley, all the way down to Roanoke, my hometown. So I go out and find opportunities for our company to build, and been doing it for Shockey for about 7 years, and I really enjoy working for them.
Nice. So, I see the trucks around, see the Sons around, know a bunch of the folks, know Gene, but say that I know a lot of folks they hear the name, but they may not necessarily be familiar with what you guys do. So I wanted to make sure that at least if nothing else, they were able to understand that. So with that, I'm going to get on to the first question here. We leave it kind of ambiguous here for a reason, but what does leadership mean to you, and what does good leadership look like?
So leadership to me, is about an individual who can guide, manage, organize, or influence individuals, supervise them through a process or a goal or an objective, to a task at hand, if you will. And that could be anything from a job to, digging a hole to whatever it may be, working with kids, et cetera. And, so if you can do that and have the cooperation via communication and being there, getting your hands dirty along with those individuals to actually exercise that leadership with that role and working with those individuals to a common goal or objective, that's good leadership. If the ones that are sold on what you're doing and can come along and be as passionate and or energized about that task is I think good leadership is important to have that. I think if you're the one carrying the whole load and everybody's kind of sitting there watching, I don't think that's good leadership. It's all about being a delegate, right? It's about delegating or taking the what the constituents want and then working it through the state to help the constituency for their needs and wants in your district. So I think that's important. I'm always trying to strive to be a better leader, but to me that's good leadership is kind of leading by example, being that role model, and that somebody or the people that play on that team look up to that individual and will do anything to get you across that finish line to be successful. Nice.
Well, what are some examples of, like, we're talking about what good leadership looks like? What are some examples that you've seen that really be indicative of, a highlight of really good, solid leadership?
Well, coming from my background, and I used to be a teacher and coach. Okay. And my father was too, and I left the profession, unfortunately, because of some of the inactions of standards of learning, and it just didn't match up to my teaching style. But good leadership to me is from being from a football coach, you can look at some of the great coaches in college and pro, and Vince Lombardi and all the great ones there, and those are some of the guys that I've learned that modeled for me in terms of how they did it and or how they're doing it now in the current sports profession, and to watch them and how they progress through showing how to do things, demonstrating it, educating the athlete, and then getting that athlete to buy in. And with that, and the belief and or the I guess you could call it branding, or buying into an identity of what that coach really wants in terms of where they want to go. That is one of those things where if you can take that leadership, and it could be anything from being a football coach to being a dad, which to me has been very challenging with my kids, trying to get them to buy into certain things, learning how to grow up and how to handle things with peer pressure and academics and activities and sports. It's the same playbook. It's just it might be a different venue, whether it's a sport or academics or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's still the same messaging. It's just how you go about addressing that subject or task. And so leaders like that, or Winston Churchill was another favorite of mine from back in the days of World War II, and Dwight Eisenhower. Those individuals were big, I guess, role models to me. My grandfather worked under Eisenhower, so I kind of learned from that through my grandfather. He was actually an assistant secretary under him, and he used to take notes from Winston Churchill when he was taking a bath to send messages to troops out in the field. He was an MP, and he was one of the chosen guys. They picked him off a procession of guys walking by one day, and Eisenhower said, "We'll take this guy, we'll take that guy." And so just kind of learning from some of those guys and how they went about, being successful and winning. And you don't have to win all the time. And that's another thing. It's one of those things where, losing is actually okay. In my line of business and being in construction, we don't win every deal. If we did, my job really wouldn't be of value, right? So I'm used to losing a lot of deals, but that's okay. There's a lot of various reasons why we don't always get those deals, but at the same time, the ones that we do win, you take a lot of satisfaction, you're gratified, and then you take a lot of you're bought into it, and you want to make that job successful from the beginning to the end, and then, you take pride in that. So at the end of the day, when you see a building get built that has our name on it, you can drive by it, a year later and say, "Hey, wow, I was involved with that from the beginning, bringing that client to us," and you take a lot of pride in that. So so those are some of the things about some of the leadership folks that I believed in, and some of the qualities that are important.
Nice. It sounds like a pretty fascinating story about. You said it was your grandfather?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. So tell us a little bit more about that. Sounds like a much deeper story in that one. So
his name. So my grandfather was a colonel. So if you could only imagine, my days of being around him was not easy. You did
a little strict.
You didn't show up late. right? And if you did, you got lambasted, and he only gave you about 30 minutes, and he gave you a lot of this, and then he'd kick you out of the house. But he loved his grandchildren, of course. But his day, he grew up in a very challenging back in the day when there was the Depression and everything, right. And he went to VMI and went into service, of course, and served. God bless him for his service. And being, serving in World War II, and he was an individual who brought the papers to de Gaulle down in Africa, the message. That was one of his famous things he did. And then from there, he moved on to the public sector. Actually, I guess it would, be the public sector, working under the federal government. And he worked under several presidents in their cabinets, working in various different roles. And let's see, I think he worked under Carter and Nixon. I could be wrong. But then from there, he actually was hired as kind of a fix-it guy. So in the corporate world. So his job was to come in and clean up a company that wasn't effectively being run, profitable.
Okay, so turnaround guy.
He wasn't the nice guy. He was the guy that would go in and clean up. And so he worked for TWA. He worked under Howard Hughes.
Oh, cool.
He worked under, so it was TWA, he worked there. And then he worked under, American Airlines, AMF, American Machine Foundry. He was president of all three of those. And then he was also chief of Ford back in the day, and worked under Henry Ford. And if you remember Lee Iacocca, he actually was instrumental in bringing Lee on. And then he was also instrumental in taking Lee off. For whatever reason,
Chrysler thanks him for that. For what it's worth, Chrysler.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. But the cool thing about it was, after he finished, he retired in Roanoke, where he was from, and he was always still involved indirectly through some of the leadership down there with people down there, some of the leaders of Roanoke, and he was always there as a stalwart, kind of a consultant, but he would always get these cars. Ford would still let him drive these cars to evaluate. So upon his death, Jaguar was bought by Ford. If you remember back in the day, that Jaguar was actually part of Ford Motor Corporation. And I had the honor and pleasure of driving the Jaguar back to the dealership. Granted, I tried to abide by the law as best I could, but you got to remember, I was just out of college, so I enjoyed that ride. But I do miss old Pops. We called him Poppy, and but he was one of those hard guys, but one of those guys that gave us a lot of leadership perspective.
Oh, I bet so. I can't imagine growing up and having that kind of perspective from, like I said, just a colonel in World War II, doing all the stuff he did with Eisenhower and Churchill, but just all the experience with in the presidential cabinets. I mean, that's extraordinarily impressive.
He had a library, not really a library. It was his office down in his basement of his house in Roanoke, and so he had all these collections. And so his children, meaning my mother and would be 5 other siblings. He had a large family. Well, after his demise, he had stuff from pictures of Eisenhower, and he had a handgun from Churchill and cufflinks from Eisenhower, and all these great collections, and a lot of war memorabilia that it was very very valuable. And so I told, I was one who kind of working with the family. I said, why don't you guys give that to the Marshall Foundation there at VMI? And, instead of dividing it up, and then somebody would take one and put it on their library bookshelf, and it would collect dust and nobody ever really know what it's all about, to put it in context. So it ended up, they actually did do that. They gave it to the Marshall Foundation. So, I actually went and visited. You can go to the archives there and you can pull it up, and it's all part of his legacy there, of course, graduating from VMI, but they still have it now and they take care of it. And there's a place to go look at it. So it's really, really something else.
Nice. So they had that on display there at VMI, huh?
They do, at the Marshall Foundation. Exactly. Yep.
Very cool. No, I definitely have to check that out. That sounds like a fascinating collection of items.
Oh, it was really cool, man. I used to take friends of mine downstairs and they'd be like, wow, it's pretty cool. I'm like, yeah. Amazing. So
that is not that far of a drive. I will definitely have to check that out.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine working for one of the companies that he had to come in and do the turnaround for. I'm sure. Yeah, that's
a little tough.
Probably so. if you were in that spot, you needed him to be there, then
you want to make sure you keep your job, right?
Yes. And you were going to make sure that you were going to end up being one of those ones where you're going to get the harsh treatment, because if you didn't need the harsh treatment, I wouldn't be here.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, I'll tell you what, no, it's fascinating. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a break on this segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. Welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We're here with Bill Wiley, and we just heard a fascinating story in the first segment about his grandfather, who was in World War II and was in a lot of the presidential administrations, and also wasn't the one you wanted to see as being the new boss when he was in consulting as a turnaround specialist. So no, that was great. Like I said, definitely have to go check that collection out there at VMI. But getting on into some of the questions for our next segment here, what was one of the biggest leadership challenges that you've ever had to face?
Yeah, so, I think one's ongoing, and actually maybe two are ongoing, and then the other one in the past. So, I talked about being in education. I want to say coaching kids and teaching them was always a challenge, and I taught, I didn't teach for long, but I did coach for about 11 years, because I coached football when I was an undergrad. I coached under Francis Dahl, who was a Hall of Fame coach in Virginia at Lake Braddock. And then after college, I went and worked for my stepdad in manufacturing, but I realized that I wanted to be in education. So I came back to get my master's in education. I got my undergrad in economics, but so I got re-engaged with being a coach at McLean High School, which I was a track coach, and then at Jeb Stuart, which is now called Justice High School in Falls Church, Virginia. So at Justice, which at the time was Jeb Stuart, at that school, it's a very multicultural school. It's truly the melting pot of schools in the country. I think it has the most diverse school populations, if not, I think it has the most, and not to mention different languages spoken. The kids literally from fresh into our country, learning. And so, having kids in our classroom, I started teaching there, and taught math, teaching them, Algebra 1 when they were literally probably not even maybe a grade level 3 in math. So that was a huge learning curve for them. And there was a language barrier, of course. And then we used to have kids on the field, or whether it be track or football, that they'd never even seen a football, much less played football. And so we had kids go in the wrong huddle, or we'd have play calls where they completely would, not understand what we're trying to say. But so, we had so many challenges in the program, not much depth, and we play these big Division VI AAA schools. And, we really had to be creative. We had to be, innovative and smart of how we led our kids through those adverse challenges and games and whatnot. But, at the end of the day, or at the end of the season, we saw so much growth, not only from their learning the language, but also from learning the sport, learning how to bond as a team, learning how to, learn the game itself. And that same thing with track, same thing, in terms of their improvement on the skill positions, track and field, and there's different types of events. So I probably found that was probably some of the most challenging for me. We had one kid from not Czechoslovakia, what's the name of it? Croatia.
Okay.
And all he wanted to do was to play football, learn, and he was a tough nose guard, and all he wanted to go back and do after he finished high school was go back and fight for his country. And he was tough as nails, but not a big kid, but just really a dedicated kid, and he'd do anything for you. So there, from there, I would say probably my other two current that I deal with are, of course, my family, with what I do in my day life with Shockey, and also work as a delegate, family life, it's a tremendous juggle. And I'm now taking care of my mom. She's in a nursing home, and I got to juggle that. She's in Roanoke. So, there's a lot of juggling. I call it being in the sandwich life, where you have children, then you have parents above you, and you're kind of wedged in there trying to figure out how to take care of everybody. So the time management and really being judicious with your time, and how to be there for your wife, with her being, a wife of mine and mom for the kids, and being there as a dad is definitely important, and it's very challenging. I'm very passionate about making sure that I'm there for those events that they have and/or activities, their school functions, and then with the delegate world, gee, you name it with that stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of fun stuff going on there. But you got campaigns. We just finished a campaign, a successful one, thank God. And then you got to, then you got to go down to the state, and then you got to show that you're elected for a reason, and you're supposed to demonstrate that you're representing your people and trying to get the message to Richmond to make sure you get bills passed. And you come back and say, hey, I listened to you. This is what we did, and these are some of the things we accomplished. So many challenges in the past, and certainly many challenges current. But I would say that those, based on leadership, those are probably the ones I can think of.
All right. So it's as we're talking about, when you joined the Virginia House of Delegates, you went from the city council straight to there, and you didn't have a full term. You were filling a spot. So you almost had to run back-to-back campaigns, didn't you?
Yeah. So the way that worked, and that's a good question, Dave. So I served on city council for 6 years, was president for one until we flipped over, lost our control of the city council, meaning Republican control. And then I was asked, to step up and serve the role as a delegate, which, after talking with both of my leaders, being my wife and my other boss, my day job boss, to see if that was okay. And the reason why I left, people ask me why, and I'm like, I did it because being a Dillon rule state, we don't write the laws here on a local basis. Those laws are written in the capital of Virginia. And so that's what, I decided, hey, man, I want to give that a shot. I want to kind of see if I can write some laws to benefit our area instead of receiving it. So I ran an election last year, and then we went into a virtual session because of COVID. And boy, that was challenging. So to go from city council, where we have Robert's Rules of Order as parliamentary procedure, to go from that to the state parliamentary procedure, which is just like the federal parliamentary procedure, called Jeffersonian parliamentary procedure, in itself a different language, right? It's a complete different way of handling day-to-day business. And so I probably spent the first half just trying to figure out how it works, and then the second half trying to figure out how to put a bill in play. So a tremendous learning curve. I'm still learning. And then now, of course, I'm filling that 2-year rotation of elections, and just ran again. So I feel like I just did it yesterday. So
well, hopefully we'll get a break for the next 2 years, and I have to worry about. Hopefully,
we'll see. Redistricting, we'll see.
Yeah, well, hopefully, I said you get a little bit of a break on that one, but it really goes to influencing people. And like I said, you're one of 100 delegates that are there, and trying to represent your constituents and to get your point of view across. I mean, obviously, the more effectively you can communicate your views and more persuasively, the better off you're going to be and more successful you're going to be. But you're right, you got to figure out the process of this first. How do I make this happen? And I can't imagine the learning curve like that.
Yeah, and I can honestly say that, coming from council chambers here in Winchester, not to discount the chambers here in Winchester, and certainly there's a lot of history there, being, our city is 1744 when we were 44. We were established in 52 when we were founded in 44, established in 52. Thank you. But you go to the General Assembly. I mean, it's the oldest legislative body in the Western Hemisphere. And when you walk into those chambers, I got pretty emotional when I went down there to get sworn in. I mean, it's one of those places where it sets you back, and you look up on those walls, and you got Jefferson, and you got all those guys that served in the same position that I'm serving in now. And I mean, that's heavy duty. And I feel honored to be there. I really do.
Nice. Well, we're happy that you were able to get down there and be reelected. Like I said, did great for the area. But I did want to throw a little bit of a shout out too. Kudos to you were talking to both of your employers before you. So obviously, kudos to the wife for letting you have that extended vacation for several months for session. But also laugh at, for years it was everybody down there, and on the top 3 ticket, everybody was a lawyer. It seemed like, and I know there was a little bit of backlash 15, 20 years ago. Hey, can we elect somebody other than a JD for down there? But kudos to Shockey for giving you the freedom to be able to go down there and spend that time during session, because that is not an easy thing to basically just take one of your main sales guys and, hey, we're not going to have our sales guy here for several, for a good bit of time, a couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, my boss is a great leader. Jeff Boehm, he's our president, and he's a guy that, as I talked about working as a team, he's a team guy. And he and I literally work right next to each other, and I talk to him constantly every day. And, so when I leave and go down to legislative session, I'm in constant communication with him. So in terms of my clients and the deals that are, coming along or fermenting or whatever you want to call it, because commercial deals, they just don't happen in a month. It's not like closing a home. They take a long time to get going. So we're in constant communication, and he's a great asset to me and very supportive. And I couldn't ask enough for my boss to help out. And certainly with the ownership, with the Shockey family, just, they want somebody there that can, that can speak for the industry. And I'm in the same, I wouldn't have done this if we had different beliefs or how we handle things, but certainly we're on the same page.
Nice.
And so, I send the messaging on their behalf, in addition to the rest of our industry, and working with them in Richmond. So, yeah.
Good deal. Yeah. Cause there's a lot of companies that just either can't or won't, or just don't have the ability to be able to have somebody to just, or if you're self-employed, to be able to, pull yourself out that quickly, be able to be gone for that length of time. So yeah, kudos to them for being able to make that sacrifice to allow you to be able to go down there. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all right, for our next question, what do you see as one of the biggest mistakes leaders make today?
I'm one of those guys that, I think two things that happens to me almost, I want to say on a daily basis, not just me, but it's others around that are, leaders and or politicians, if you will, or people in my role as a sales, is that you want to be, you always want to be positive, right? I think negative messaging it just doesn't do you any favors. And I think when you do negative messaging, and I catch myself doing it, and believe me, it's not productive. And at the end of the day, it's all about promoting you and your message and your team's message. And so if you can be passionate and willing and just, work on that end and being positive, I think that's very important. And the second one I want to say that people constantly do, and I catch myself doing it, I'm not perfect, is using the word you. You are wrong. You should be doing this. You're this, you're that. That word you is always handled typically in a negative light. And it puts that person in an adverse role, meaning they're going to want to push back against you.
Right.
So if you should, instead of say we, or I feel, or I want to do this, or I want whatever, and then you work as a we, as a team, I think the word you is just a very negative connotation. And I've learned that just from experience. And so those two things, I think, make leadership. I think it helps you being a more effective leader.
Yeah. And most people don't take very kindly to you should, you need to,
Yep.
That's very,
it's a negative connotation.
It is negative. And you're right. It's just human nature to kind of gravitate to the negative. I mean, It's very easy to do. We all do it. I mean, it takes a lot of intentionality to continue to be on the positive end of that.
Yeah.
And continue to push that.
Yeah.
No, it's a tough one, because like I said, with everything going on in the world, sometimes it's difficult, to put it nicely, to stay positive.
Yeah. Well, you got to be, just grin and bear it, right?
Yeah.
Bite your lip and move on.
Keep on going. You're like you said, well, like you have to. If you don't, like I said, the bad part is, yes, it's intentional and it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of work. It's well worth it. But I mean, you think about the folks you see that have gone negative and stayed negative, and how easy that is. And that just as a spiral down, it seems like, to just nothing that's good. I'll put it that way. Positive.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and you said half the time, if you're there in Richmond and you're trying to convince people to vote for your bill or go along with this, or convince people to do things, the last thing you can afford to do is put people off.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I heard one gentleman I listened to, I think his name was Vish Parashar. He was, I met him through the National Speakers Association. He had written a book, and I've seen some other folks talk about the same concept, but he was in improv for years. Oh, wow. And he would always talk about, and he was using the art of improv to really help work with business leaders and stuff about changing their vocabulary, change the way they look at things. And that's what reminded me of that. He wrote a book, I think it was called Yes and. So he was trying to get everybody to get to the point of getting rid of the, yeah, that's good, but, and you talk about it, all the negative connotations came with yes, but, because no matter what was said beforehand, as soon as they heard the but, it's like, okay, well.
That's Nick Saban from Alabama's favorite statement right there. So when they're looking for kids that they want to coach, they want the and kids.
Yep. The yes and. That way they can say, okay, that's great. Yep. And the other one that was fairly similar from a leadership perspective that I really liked was a comment that Marshall Goldsmith had made ages ago. Now he wrote the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and Triggers, and what a great academic line too. But I liked the fact of how he mentioned that there's a concept of adding too much value. And at first I'm thinking, okay, well, what are you talking about? Adding too much value? That doesn't make sense. But if you bring an idea and then maybe 80 or 90% what it could be, and this person's all excited about giving you this idea and taking the ball and running with it. And as a boss, you're like, kind of the yes, but yeah, that's great. But, and then you add your 2 cents worth into it. You might've made the idea 5% better, right? But you've taken away 50 or 60% of their motivation to do anything with it.
That's exactly right.
And so you really calls it adding too much value.
Well said.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's a pretty good concept.
Teaching me. You taught me something today. Thank you, Dave.
Hey, good. It's always a positive. I'll pick something up along the way. But we're going to go ahead and end this segment here, and we will be back shortly with Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. Welcome back to our third and final segment here of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We are pleased to be here with Bill Wiley, man of many hats, from business development manager there at Howard Shockeyson, general contractor, to Virginia State Delegate and former Winchester City Council person. So, like I said, lots of different hats with that and some great perspectives on leadership. Let's go ahead and get into our final segment questions here, and then we can kind of go from there. But to start out with, what do you think is the best way for leaders to really improve their leadership skills?
Education. I can't speak enough for that. In my line of business, whether it's being a delegate, whether it's being, a salesperson at Shockey, whether it's being a family member or whatever it may be, I'm always about trying to put more things in that noggin of mine to try to be a better person at those tasks or roles and responsibilities. And I can't speak enough for that. People say, do you like, well, of course I like being a family member, right? I mean, that's easy, the love of my life. And I certainly wouldn't have any other way. And I don't have any regrets there at all, but it's, learning about how to be a better dad, learning how to be a better husband. Certainly my wife reminds me of certain ways to do it every day. I try to
I think they all do.
And I still, to this day, I haven't fixed certain things and I need to fix certain things. But I think that educating yourself, whether, certainly there's things to read and there's videos to watch and that sort of thing, but certainly learning from people that model it, the people that are your role models from past and individuals that, I guess we think they were successful, at least it appears they were successful or that sort of thing, but kind of learning from those individuals and in the process and how they went about doing it so that you can kind of pick up that tidbit of saying, I can be a better person for this. This may be a better way to do it. And then from there, trying to put it in your daily life and how you interact or how you do everything on a daily basis and starting to make that a normal thing in your brain and start thinking in that way is important. at Shockey, I'm always eager or wanting to get educated, go to a conference, talk to a peer of mine. I mean, even talk to competition. How did you guys do it? Or learning from a client. Gee, why didn't I get that job? Certain things like that. So at the end of the day, you want to become a better person. You want to become more successful in what you do on a daily basis. I mean, repetition, right? The old saying is repetition is the motherhood of learning, right? So the more you learn on how to be better, exactly how you do things, and there might be a different way of doing it that might make you more successful you're not aware of. But the only way you're going to learn that is through educating yourself about what else is out there. I mean, being on city council and now being a delegate, you'd be surprised that, I mean, I was talking to somebody this morning about it. We're dealing with a major mental health crisis here and throughout the state. I mean, I want to say it's nationally now. It has been nationally. But you don't learn because we're the only one that knows how to fix this problem. I'm looking out, I'm talking to other delegates throughout the state. I'm talking to guys in Richmond to how to say, hey, how are you guys dealing with this crisis? How are you dealing with how to fix this issue? And so I always lean on my counterparts. I lean on people in other parts of the state. I'll even, going back to my Shockey world, I'll even lean on to guys that aren't in my so-called my competition, but
right.
They're still in the construction business. How'd you guys do this? How'd you come about winning that job? Same way with delegate or being a family man. You kind of want to reach out to other individuals kind of in your shoes, or at least something similar, and just say, hey, bounce off some ideas on how we can go about fixing it for me and or making me a better person. So I think that's critical. I think that every successful leader you've seen or read about, they didn't just become natural leaders. They didn't learn how to walk within a day. They fumbled. I'm sure they fell a lot. I'm sure they made a huge amount of mistakes. I'm sure that the door was slammed in their face a million times and the word no was told them a zillion times. They got up, they busted they dusted their pants off and they went back at it. I deal with that every day, but do I give up? No. Do I want to be better at what I do? Absolutely. Why? Because, that's the nature of it. And it's just like playing golf, right? I'm probably one of the worst golfers, and I love playing.
I might have you beat on that one. I don't know.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say is, golf's a game that, the game's about you, right? It's not about the team. It's about you. So you're your own measuring stick. So literally when you're going out and hitting that ball, which I don't do well at most of the time, but when I do hit it right, man, it makes you come back, right? Because after you shank it 10 times, you're like, I'm giving up on the sport. Now you're not. You can take another shot and give it another go. And sure enough, when you hit that next great shot, you're like, oh, I love this game. So those are the gratifications. You got to take it in small bites, but those are the things that you got to remember to appreciate, take advantage of, learn from, and apply it to the next time so that you can become better at what you do, whatever that might be. And so that's critical, I think, in the learning process of becoming an effective leader.
Nice. I know some folks that, going back to your point, as far as dealing with people that are in the industry, may not be as easy to do sometimes with direct competitors, but folks that have reached out to other firms in the same industry and are not in an area where they don't compete, and try to, whether they meet through conferences or they meet through, online, however, and try to build those relationships and try to, bounce ideas off each other because they are in a non-compete type of area. You've got somebody in Arizona, they're not going to come out to Virginia to probably build a elementary school and vice versa.
Yeah.
Just not cost effective, but you also can, come up with good ideas from each other and work together to grow and develop. And that's, I think, the value of building a lot of relationships when you do go to conferences, seminars, things like that are out of town that that are big in the industry, to foster those relationships because of things like that.
Yeah. And I think another one I didn't mention was these podcasts. I don't listen to enough podcasts, which I should. I mean, I drive a lot, and sometimes I'll get onto a podcast or I'll, get onto a radio show like yours, and I'll listen to how some of these things are done. I mean, coming from the teaching profession, I've learned out of the thousands of dollars spent on going through my master's program, probably the biggest thing that I learned was that it's critical to take that learning style and that teaching style, that individual and the teacher, and then you have the student,
Right.
connecting them together, right? So one might have a teaching style, this is how they do it. And then the learning style of this individual is this is how they do it. And you got to learn how to mesh them, right? So that
Right.
teacher has to be multifaceted on how to address it so that finally fits to get that message across. So same thing of going back to what we're talking about now is that learning, those individuals, or we should, as we want to learn or become better at being a leader, we need to find ways that the messaging fits to how we want to learn or appreciate or be motivated to learn about whatever it may be. I think that's critical to becoming an effective leader and to getting better at what you do in your profession.
Nice. I remember hearing a statement a long time back that leaders are made in a crock pot, not a microwave. And so it's something that, yeah, you it takes some time. It takes some, like I said, skinning your knees and, knocking your head on some walls a little bit to build those skills to make that happen. I think from a leadership development point of view, and I'd love to get your take on this. One of the things and one of the talks that I talk about on the kind of 5 keys to build a leadership culture is one of the things that's giving the leaders that are coming up in your organization the opportunity to use those skills, develop those skills, because if they don't ever get a chance to do it in practice, and I say in practice, but with things that aren't going to bankrupt the company if it goes wrong, giving those developmental opportunities, those chances to use those leadership skills before they get that next big promotion. Talk a little bit about the kind of the importance on that and in building depth in the bench.
Yeah. So, I mean, life is not, at least from where I've come from, I just turned 50, so getting up there. But yeah, life is not about, going from A to B, meaning going from A to nobody and B to the leader of a company within a day, right? So life is about, it's kind of like it's the zigzag approach, but you're slowly climbing the ladder. But you're not climbing at a vertical, you're climbing at a kind of a steady climb. And you might take that 2 steps back to get that 1 step forward every now and then. But the idea of taking those steps and learning the process and fumbling and getting back up and saying, okay, let me try it again, and getting your hands dirty. I mean, it's okay to be uncomfortable, right? It's okay. I mean, coming from a person like me, and I'll probably speak for many,
right?
I think many of us aren't very comfortable with speaking to a lot of people. I get it. I'm not either. I don't think any of us are. But as the old saying goes, the repetition is motherhood of learning.
Yeah.
The more you get out in front of people, the more you realize this is just like talking to you right now, we're just face to face. Just add, 100 more people. It's not that as much as it's difficult. It's an uncomfortable feeling and it's a different environment. And it's just a matter of getting used to that environment. And yeah, I learned a lot of this, when you're going through school or when you're in a new job and somebody puts you in that uncomfortable role, if stepping up is probably the most important thing you can do. I served in the Army. I don't know if I guess I mentioned you, but I served the National Guard. I was in the Army Reserves from college till after I finished. And the old saying goes, you're not supposed to volunteer. Don't ever volunteer when you're in boot camp.
Well, growing up in Hampton Roads my whole life for 35 years, I learned exactly what the acronym Navy stood for from a lot of enlisted folks that I was friends with. It was never again volunteer yourself.
Never again volunteer. Yeah. And I mean, I was really quiet. I was kind of the quiet reserve guy. I didn't really say much considering that. I did what I needed to do. I followed the commands correctly. Coming from my grandfather, I kind of learned that quickly. But towards the end of boot camp, I kind of started getting a little bit more committed or buying in, if you will. Right. The more I did, the more I realized I'm like, it's not that bad. It's just, you got to figure it out. I mean, you got to learn that it's okay to try this, and you might get slapped around a little bit, but it's okay to get bumps and bruises and somebody to make you look bad. I mean, the hardest thing in life, right, is somebody to take your pride or somebody to take away from what you feel. Somebody's really demoted you or made you feel bad or took your self-esteem away. That's okay. You can get it back. You just need to learn from that and step right back up and take advantage of that lesson so that you can become bigger and better. I don't know how many times, going back to the football world, we've had athletes that we were going up against guys that were men compared to some of these boys. And, it's kind of like the David Goliath approach. Step up, learn from watching tape on that guy. Everybody has a weakness, right? So if you can find that weakness, you can exploit it and you can get the best of them. Not every play, but sometimes you can get the best of that individual. And hey, that's a win, right? That's big time. That's huge. So always take that to heart.
Nice. Yeah, you just need to get past that big bruiser once and fly past him and be able to catch that pass and go. I mean,
been there a lot too.
Yeah, I was going to say it, but you take a beating just trying to play their game. I like what you said about watching the film and find the weakness because, like I said, you play Goliath against his own game, and then you're going to lose every single time. You've got to be able to figure out the chinks in the armor. The weakness is where he's got a zig and you can zag, something to that effect.
Exactly.
No, that's funny. I want to kind of follow up on, before we get to our last question, you had mentioned about uncomfortable and communication skills. And it's funny because I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on how important developing, especially as a leader, developing your public speaking and communication skills are.
Yeah. So, and I'm still learning. Let me just say that for the record. Learning through this process about the public speaking side and representing people, when you're on the stump, you got to do it whether you like it or not. Right. So you might as well just get used to it. And stepping into that role, so I guess some pointers I could throw out. If you're afraid of public speaking, focus on talking to one person. Remember we talked about the one person one-on-one.
Yep.
It's the same thing as we're talking to many. You just got to speak louder. You got to speak in a microphone or whatever. But if you could focus on one individual to talk to as you're trying to talk to the rest, right? Treat it as one body or one person, right? So that's one kind of good way to start to kind of help you get through that challenge or that emotional challenge of getting in there and all of a sudden you freeze up. The confidence thing is always the hardest part, right? God, I really don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. But your brain, you got to remember your brain, you're training your brain, right? So you got to start telling your brain, I can do this, right? So you got to start giving it positive reinforcement to start getting it into that rhythm of, gee, stop second guessing, start thinking, I can do this. And there is no other way than not, right? So we're going to do this. And so what's that, the Nike thing? Let's do this, or we can do it, or whatever it is. Let's do it. Just do it. Yeah. Just do it. Right. And so that's the mindset. So you're game planning, you're pre-gaming, right? And no matter, you could be going up to, you might be walking into something where you're going to get drilled. Somebody's just going to give you what for in terms of communication. That's fine. But if you go in there with that positive feeling and just got some kind of talking points of, hey, just focus on that one person to talk to, practice your message, right? Before you go in, take a sheet of paper, write down some high points, kind of go over in your head about those high points, just talking points. And you can think about, I'm going to talk about 3 things, right? So you don't forget. And then when you get in there, you can count them off on your fingers as you're talking to people. That's another easy way to kind of get through that adversity of speaking to a public audience. And I guess the final point of that is positive, right? I keep saying positive, positive. Because what you're doing is right, you're going in, you're selling yourself, right? You're not going in to just do it and get over the exercise and walk back off the stage. You're there to deliver a message for a reason. You're there because somebody wants you there to speak, and somebody wants you there to try to sell something, right? So you're there to sell yourself for whatever you're passionate about. So those things in mind, that should make you feel comfortable, right? Because if you're passionate about what you believe in and that's what you decided to buy into, it should be easy. It's just a matter of practicing those things, being positive, and then going out, and I'm going to focus on that one person to talk to, and we're going to get the message out.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely crucial for leaders to develop those leadership skills, because like I said, if it's all about influence, it's all about persuading people to come to your point of view. The number one way we do that is by communicating with people. And if you're lacking those skills, I think, they're in direct proportion to your effectiveness as a leader in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, you want people to buy in, right?
Yeah.
And I think two other things I want to tell is real quick is, I have other folks, wanting to get into politics and whatever, and they talk to me about, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you get into this world of doing this? And, I ask them certain questions, but one thing I tell them is like, when you go up on the stump, don't go over there and talk about everything. Just get in there, hit the high points, and be done. And not only that, be not monotone. Don't talk like this. You gotta, when you're emotional, you should be up and down. And I mean, you should be really trying to rev that crowd up and get people clapping their fingers and yelling and screaming and excited. So
you're telling me Charlie Brown's teacher is not going to get someone excited?
No, wow. Yeah, exactly. None of that.
Come on, man.
None of that.
You're killing me.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's awesome. Well, tell our listeners how they can connect with you. Find out more about you.
Yeah. So my aide, her name is Susan Schick. She kind of runs all the day-to-day for me. And then it kind of filters down to me accordingly based on certain topics or hot buttons or whatnot. And the email, and I've got several emails, guys, so I apologize. I got to read over this to make sure I'm getting this right to everybody. It's DELB Wiley. So it's Delegate Bill Wiley, or DELB Wiley at house.virginia.gov. That's my email. I see it. My aide sees it, but she filters it down to me based on things that are appropriate based on certain different types of topics, state-related matters. My phone number is 804-698-1029, and that's our main line number. And you can leave a message, and we pick up on that, and then we filter it through accordingly, just like we do with emails. Of course, I try to make events as much as I can based on my schedule. We got Veterans Day coming up. I'll be at an event or two there, and of course, with other events and whatnot throughout the year, I do try to make those events, because an old friend of mine used to tell me, keep showing up. That's the only way you can, get people to know you. And that's important. So I will try to do my best to be at every event as possible. And if people want me to come talk, or if they want me to come listen to them about certain things, we can set up a meeting or meetings or whatever events. Certainly, please let me know. I'd love to hear more.
It sounds great. Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate you being with us today. And we will see you all next time on Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave.